was fresh gunfire on the streets of Kazakhstan's biggest city, Almaty, as unrest in the Central Asian state continues. Russian paratroopers have arrived in a bid to help President Tokayev suppress the dissent. Protests, which initially started over the rising cost of natural gas, have turned into anti-government demonstrations across the country. Dozens have been killed, hundreds have been hospitalized, and nearly 2,000 people have reportedly been arrested. Clemence Waller reports.
An intense shooting broke out between Russian soldiers and armed individuals in front of Almaty City Hall in Kazakhstan on Thursday. It's reported that dozens of protesters have been killed during the worst street protest the country has seen since gaining independence 30 years ago. Plumes of smoke soared from government buildings after being set alight. According to reports, 12 police officers have died and over 300 were injured. The protests began on Sunday in the west of the country after a sharp price hike in liquefied gas fuel. They spread quickly to the city of Almaty and the capital Nur-Sultan, where riots and looting broke out. The Kazakh president, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, vowed severe consequences for those participating in the riots. Currently, he has implemented a 2-week state of emergency, a nationwide curfew, and has called upon Russia for military assistance. Leading a security coalition, Moscow has deployed its first peacekeeping troops to quell the unrest.
The European Union says Russia must respect Kazakhstan's sovereignty and independence. It's urged restraint on all sides, saying the violence must stop. Well, let's get more on this from Maeve McMahon in Brussels. So, Maeve, relations between the EU and Russia are already under severe strain, with Moscow's threat to Ukraine, its support of Lukashenko in Belarus, and now Kazakhstan.
Absolutely, and that's why, in fact, there's a real mood of deep concern here in the de facto EU capital tonight about the ongoing, very fluid and very complicated situation in Kazakhstan, and the reports that peacekeeping forces from Russia have also entered the scene. And that's why we heard this topic be discussed as a priority today in the European Commission, with an EU spokesperson saying that they were monitoring the situation in Kazakhstan very, very carefully and helping and hoping for a peaceful outcome, and saying that the European Union stood ready to help with the dialogue. The European Union, of course, has been building relations carefully with Kazakhstan for the last 30 years since it's gained independence, and has an EU delegation office there. And meanwhile, for his part, Joseph Borrell, the EU's top foreign diplomat who's currently in Ukraine this week, also expressed his concern from Kiev. Speaking today, he said the images of Russian troops, peacekeeping troops from Russia in Kazakhstan, reminded him of images from the past that he hoped should be avoided. Now, over in the European Parliament, members of the Parliament have been quiet for their part on Kazakhstan because they're still on vacation, but you can be sure that this topic will be of priority when they meet next week, and of course in Strasbourg as well on the 17th of January. It's just the kind of instability that the world and Europe doesn't need right now.
There are efforts to ease tensions between Russia and Ukraine underway in Moscow, with diplomats from France and Germany. How is that going to affect Kazakhstan? How will this situation affect that?
Well, first and foremost, it will certainly increase the stress levels of the Europeans and the Ukrainians in the room in that meeting today, because it's another example, diplomats and onlookers believe, of Vladimir Putin flexing his muscles, and one diplomat saying him trying to have his cake and trying to eat it, because all focus and all energies here, of course, in Brussels, in both the EU quarter and in NATO, are on finding a solution to the situation in Ukraine, especially in the east of Ukraine, and on the reports that there are over 100,000 Russian troops ready to invade Ukraine in a 3-phase attack. And tomorrow we'll be seeing NATO officials meeting in a virtual manner to discuss the situation and try to de-escalate it. Then, of course, on Sunday we will see the Americans and the Russians meeting in Geneva for talks that many people feel won't have much of an outcome.
Thanks for that update, Maeve. For more on this, I'm now joined by Paul Stronsky. He is a senior fellow at Carnegie's Russia and Eurasia program. Thank you for joining us at Euronews. Russia was very quick to send military aid to Kazakhstan to quell this dissent. It didn't intervene that quickly in other instances of unrest in the region. So why Kazakhstan?
Well, I think, first of all, everything that's happened in Kazakhstan has taken the Russians by surprise. I think it has taken the Kazakh government and the Kazakh people by surprise. But there's a few interesting things about Kazakhstan that I think is important to note. First of all, it shares a over 7,500 kilometer unprotected border with Russia. So Russia is certainly worried about instability there. It is one of its key and closest security allies, but it is also the second largest economy in the Eurasian Economic Union. So for all these reasons, I think it is far more important than any other country that is a member of the Collective Security Organization, which is officially who is sending in the troops. They are generally Russian. So I think that's one. And secondly, Kazakhstan is very much like Russia. It is a hydrocarbon large economy. It is a Russian-speaking with large impact of Russian culture. And if this can happen in Kazakhstan, then I'm sure that if there's a bottom-up revolt can happen in Kazakhstan, that also unnerves the Russian regime. And they want to make sure that that doesn't happen so there's no precedent in the region.
President Putin is busy on several other fronts, particularly with Ukraine and its threatened invasion. Can Russia afford another long-running deployment?
That's the biggest question. I mean, Russia has troops now throughout the region. It's got it's got a problem in Belarus, but it also has troops in the Caucasus, in Azerbaijan, Armenia, and now it has it here. What I think we're seeing is in your previous report you highlighted that many European officials are on vacation. The United States is not paying a whole lot of attention, but Russia is certainly showing that it's quite nimble and able to respond to crises, particularly in its region. They're being very careful. They're trying to not get directly in front of the protesters. They're trying to secure facilities. They're trying to secure government assets and Russian military assets that are in the country, leaving the messy putting down of the violence to the Kazakhs. But still, they're proving that they're quite nimble, quite willing to take risks, and actually, certainly have the capability for at least several simultaneous deployments.
The unrest may have started about fuel prices, but it's spilled over into much more. What does President Tokayev have to do? What must he do to get people back on his side?
Well, first of all, I think the Kazakh people are shocked and dismayed by the violence. There's a lot of dissent in the country. This did start by gas protests. He's walked that back. But what I think the pandemic has hit this country hard. High inflation, budgets are stretched. The social safety net has collapsed, so people are angry. And meanwhile, there's a lot of oil wealth leaving the country, so they're particularly angry at the political and economic elites. And I think this is what has driven, protesters across the country. However, the scenes of violence, the looting that we've seen, the attacks on both civilians, journalists, police, do unnerve people. So I think the violence is certainly pulling some people back onto his side. But I think what he really needs to do is, first of all, make sure the Russians have a limited presence, because there's a highly rising nationalism in the country that doesn't like the Russian presence, or won't like the Russian presence. And then, once order is confirmed, really work on some of these governance issues and get the economy moving, and sort of meet some of the demands for a greater say of the Kazakh people in how their life is governed, because they really don't have one at this point. Their only option is the street.